Okay. At any time, if you need assistance or you need to have a question answered, please let me know. If you don't ask it in class, you can ask it after class or via email, whatever you want to do. So let's look at chapter 4. I'm going to share the screen. In chapter 4, it deals with market forces of supply and demand. We're going to break down who produces, who generates the supply curve, who generates the demand curve, and the logic behind each one of them. So if we look at the market forces for supply and demand, and we're looking at the first graph. Now this present slideshow primarily focuses on the graphs, and the graphs only. And when we're getting into supply and demand, I think everybody needs to at least download this or print it and have it ready for you when you test. Because there's a lot of information just on this short slide presentation. What we're looking at here is the demand for ice cream cones by Catherine. And we can see if they're free, Catherine wants a bunch of them. But if they cost $12 per unit, Catherine wants 0. This is a downward sloping, negatively sloping curve. Because as the price goes up, the quantity demanded will fall. So they go 10, they want 1, 8, they want, price of 2, they want 8, 3, they want 6, 4, they want 4, 2, they want 5, and it's $6. They're out of it. Okay? This is always price, and this is always quantity. If they give you the data in tests like this, there's no calculations required. If they want you to create a demand curve, all you have to do is go back to this information right here. You need to know the price, and you need the quantity, and you need to know what happens when they change the price up or down as it relates to quantity. Now, what they want to do here, they're going to show us the market demand. Because Catherine is not the only consumer of ice cream. However, not everyone likes ice cream as much as Catherine, or may like it more. Here we see Catherine's demand is fairly straightforward. It's downward slope of -2. But we look at Nicholas' demand, he is much more sensitive. On the quantity. However, when you look at raising the price on Nicholas from a price of 3 to 4, he only loses 1 unit. Whereas if you raise the price from 3 to 4 on Catherine, you lose 2 units. If you want to know the market demand, you just add these two together, Catherine and Nicholas. We have the prices. They're the same for both graphs. That's the only way this will work. You have the demand for ice cream cones, and you just total it up. So the market demand for just those 2 individuals is going to be 19 cones. If they're free, $16, $13, so forth. So this represents the number of cones that they will consume at the varying prices. if we want to know the true scope of this, we'd have to talk to everybody and determine how much they like ice cream or how much satisfaction or utility they get from consuming ice cream and what they're willing to pay for it. Here we have one person willing to pay or buy 1 unit at $6. That's Nicholas. But we can look at this and tell immediately that that's not where they're going to be most profitable as a business if they try to do this. But this demand curve is created by you, the consumer. You vote with your dollars and cents. If somebody places a product on the shelf for $2 and you don't think it's worth $2, you walk away. And if everybody walks away, they realize their pricing strategy is wrong, or they created a product that nobody wants. And they either have to modify the supply to make you change your mind, or they just have to walk away. But when we look at the demand curve, there's the market demand. There will be test questions on that. They'll just give you the individual demand and ask you to find the market demand. Very simple, just add them together. Here's something you need to remember. When we're looking at supply and demand curves, and here we see a demand curve is negatively sloped, which makes sense. The lower the price, the more we want. But in this scenario, they show the shifts of the demand curve. It's not up and down. When you look at demand and supply, if there's an increase in demand, that curve moves to the right. And it's signified by the direction of that arrow. So what's happening is you were originally willing to buy the product. Let's see. Let me get my new little toy. I have a regular pen in my hand. Okay. We originally wanted this quantity, this price. But as it increased, if it's an increase in demand and the price remains constant, we're now willing to buy this quantity at the price. That is a true increase in quantity. We as consumers decide we're willing to pay at the same price, we're willing to buy more. And we're going to get into the determinants of supply and demand in a bit. But just like we see an increase, we can also see a decrease. With that decrease, we'll see the same thing happen. If we have a price that is set at this level, this will be the quantity. And this is just an abstract price and quantity. But look at what happens. If we have a decrease in demand, for some reason, the consumer doesn't want it. And there's a variety of causes that can determine that. One, let's say we're in a recession and we got 50% or 15% unemployment. Everybody's going to be hoarding their money if they still have a job. Even people that are secure in their jobs are going to be concerned. That will decrease the demand. If we have a decrease in income, there'll be a decrease in demand for the product. Nothing in the product changed. It was all based on consumer reaction. So the business is not going to change this demand curve. You as a consumer make the decision whether to buy more or less based on your current circumstance. It could be a newer, better product comes out. It could be that there's a complement or a substitute to your product that gets cheaper. Either way, as consumers, we have to be aware of that. Any questions about the movements? Okay. Give me a second to figure this out. Okay, if we have no questions on that, we're going to move on a little bit and look at what makes this curve move. Why would it move to the left or to the right? Okay, and that's the next one. This is one of the things I would advise you to print out and put in your notebook or ever how you want to look at it. Set up a folder, a binder with chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and have this type of material in there so you're ready if something comes up and dealing with determinants of supply or demand. You can write it out in your notebook, but this is something you need to know because they're going to try to trick you on it when you get to the test. And one of the things they try to trick you on is if the price of good itself changes, just the price itself, there's no movement of this curve because the change of the price would be a supply factor, not a demand factor. So there'd be movement along the demand curve, but no movement of the supply curve. Of the demand curve. So you have to be careful. If they say there's movement along, that curve did not move. If they tell you there's movement along the supply curve, the demand curve moved, not the supply curve. And the reverse is true here. If it's moving along the demand curve, that means the supply curve moved, not the demand curve. Your desire to consume the product did not change. So if we look at this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 determinants of demand or variables. And with income, we can break it down into 2 parts. Here, they're showing policy to discourage smoking. This isn't really the one I wanted to see. I'm going to bring up something. I'm going to bring up a basic supply and demand curve. Okay. And looking at this, let's see if I can draw on it. There's 2 things that move the demand curve. And here we have both demand and supply. Okay, it's got to find the marker. If the demand curve is going to move, it's going to move to the right or to the left, not up and down. So let's say we're looking at uh, ribeye steaks. Okay, well, let's say there's a decrease. So I don't want to do this. If there's a decrease in income, the ribeye steaks would be what most people consider as a normal good. So a normal good, if the income goes down, we will see a reduction in the demand. And then we'll see a new quantity and price at equilibrium. If they want to sell those products to us, as our income falls, they're going to have to reduce the price. And also they're going to reduce the quantity. Okay? Now, if for some reason we get a big increase in pay, which is something everybody wants, if you make $1 million, you want to make $1 million too. If for some reason your income goes up, you see a shift in the demand curve to the left. And you see the movement there. Now you see an increase in quantity and price. Because as your willingness to pay more goes up, the producer's willing to produce more. This just makes sense. When you look at the supply curve, the more you're willing to pay, the more they're going to give you. Okay? Any questions on this, the basic movement of supply and demand? Now, I know in the book, they start off, they're basically looking at a singular curve, like we see here. And they show the movement to the right or to the left. But we have to realize that there's a supply curve there as well when we start looking at the market as a whole. So we'll have a supply and a demand curve. And we'll have a situation where we'll look something like this. Here's the demand curve shift to the right. We see the movement along the supply curve. But there's movement of the supply curve. We see movement of the demand curve. We see the equilibrium has now shifted upward and the quantity upward. Now on the supply, the same directionality applies. If the supply curve moves to the left, that's a decrease in supply. And we can see that based on what's going on with we can look at the quantity. There's it's supposed to be a straight line. There's a quantity, the original equilibrium, and here's our new quantity. We see the movement to the left. And we can look at the movement of the equilibrium and determine that it is a decrease in supply, because we see a decrease in quantity. Here we see an increase in quantity based on demand. Here's a decrease based on supply. Price of related goods. Let's think of that. Let's think Coke and Pepsi. If there are individuals that are diehard Coke consumers and some are diehard Pepsi consumers. Minor fluctuations in pricings don't bother them. Some individuals, they actually keep up with the changes in sales at convenience at not drugstores, but at grocery stores. Because one week you'll have the 12-pack cans on sale for Coke. A couple weeks later, you have the Pepsi. It's been a cycle that's been going on for many years. But those are substitutes. So we have a Coke and Pepsi machine sitting side by side. If they raise the price on the Coke to $2 and the Pepsi's $1.50, more people are going to move to the Pepsi. So there'll be an increase in the demand for the Pepsi, but it'll also be a decrease in demand for the Coke because those individuals were making a choice between the two products, and price swayed quite a few to move from Coke to Pepsi. Now, if Coke discounted their price to $1.25 and Pepsi remained the same at $1.50, Coke would get some of those buyers. So they would see an increase in demand, and Pepsi would see a decrease in demand. You see this all the time. You know, gasoline. You go to a corner, there's 4 different gas stations. They're all charging very similar prices. The other thing we're looking at when we look at price-related goods, there's 2 parts of it. There's complements and substitutes. If you have a complementary good, we'll say coffee and creamer. If there's an increase in the price of coffee, you'll see a decreased demand for the creamer because people can consume less coffee and therefore less creamer. So the only way they're going to survive is if they drop their price to get that total price down to where the market expects it to be. You got peanut butter and jelly, hot dog and hot dog rolls. There's so many complements out there. And taste, this is kind of a catch-all. In a lot of cases, I think with taste, we can see where a lot of the ones that they say are taste actually fall somewhere else, like with the number of buyers. But when you're looking at taste, if you go to the restaurant in Johnson County and you ask for tea, it's going to be sweet tea. If you go up into New York and other areas up north, Pennsylvania, you ask for tea, just tea, you'll get unsweetened tea or hot tea. And if you want sweet tea, you'll have to add the sugar yourself. It's just taste. If you buy barbecue in this part of Johnson, this part of North Carolina, it's going to be vinegar based. And it's usually pork. You go to the mountains and the coast, it's got a tomato based product. You go into South Carolina, it's mustard based barbecue sauce. It's just taste. And everybody has different tastes, and they can change. They change over time. So as a business, you need to be aware of that transition from one to the other. Expectations on the demand curve. Remember, this is what you think is going to happen. If I tell you that the price of gas is going to go up to $1 tomorrow, $1 per gallon, you're going to go straight to the gas pumps and fill your car with gas. If I tell you the price is going to go down tomorrow, you'll watch that little miles remaining graphic in your car, or just you'll run it to the red line to empty and wait until tomorrow to fill up with cheaper gas. And if you have to, you just buy a small amount of gas today to get you through until tomorrow. That's expectations. If you expect the price to go up, you buy now. If you expect the price to go down, you sell. I mean, you wait until that time takes place. Number of buyers. When we look at the number of buyers, there's a couple things you have to look at. Let me see. Okay. Okay. Okay, I want to stop sharing. I'll bring it back. If we're looking at the number of buyers, let's say that on a skate park, in that skate park, the community, they expect the population to expand by, let's say, 50% in 10 years. Now, look at the demand for the skate park tickets and the supply for the tickets. And this is our current quantity and price demanded. We may be serving a very small portion of the population. So here's the skate park. Got a skater on a skateboard. If there's an increase in the population, 10%, we can't assume that this demand curve over here is going to shift to the right by 10%. We have to understand that there's two things required to be a consumer of a product. You must have desire, capacity. So we may have the skate park located in a retirement community in Florida. We probably shouldn't have been there to start with because the demand was not so strong. But somehow we decided we would stay. If that population goes up, we will see no change in our demand. It's not going to equal this 10%. And we have to look at these two factors. The seniors that are there, they have income sufficient to pay for the skate park tickets. So the capacity is there. If we look at the per capita GDP for that community, and let's say it's $80,000, that means they have the capacity to consume if they desire to. This is the thing that's missing, is desire. They have the capacity but no desire. So they're not part of the population for this product. And I have to know that when I go in and start a business, I need to look at all the demographics for the community I'm going into. I need to know uh, their age. I need to know the incomes. I need to know their children. I need to see the population growth under 16, especially if I'm dealing with a skate park or something like that. And then make my decision where I'm going to continue operations based on that information and that information only. That data is available through the Census Department. And if we're the only one going in there and we see that information, that's probably the reason the other people didn't do the same thing. So just remember, you have to have both desire and capacity. In this retirement community, they need a golf cart store. They need golf cart repairs. They need scooters. They need a crematorium. They need caskets or us. There's all kinds of things that they'll have both the desire and the capacity to consume. But being a skate park is not one of them. So you just have to be aware of that as the supplier of these goods, that they have to have both desire and capacity to consume. Now, if we're looking at the number of buyers, let's say we're just dealing with electricity, measuring kilowatt hours. I did a study for a regional co-op around Fayetteville. And I looked at all their historical data, and I looked at the number and the changes in population during those same time frames. It was like 15 years. And I came up with a statistical model that showed that how much additional power they had to generate for each additional person that entered the community. And that's information they needed to have. Because if they were projecting the population growth of 5% in 5 years, they need to have an increase in their production, their ability to produce energy, or to get the people that are not energy efficient to become energy efficient. Like selling LED lighting at ridiculous prices, or giving tax credits, those type things. We're giving credits to the monthly bills for being energy efficient. There's a lot of things they can do to reduce consumption without building additional power generating facilities. So let's move on. And now we're going to get down here and start looking at supply. Here we see the market force supply and demand. Basically here they're just showing you if you move to the right, move to the left, you'll see a change in the consumption even if it's the same price. Now this one right here, this is where the company itself increases the price of the cigarettes. They did not change the demand curve. They just changed the pricing on the products. And that was the objective of all the taxes that were placed on cigarettes, was to get people to transition away from cigarettes because of cost. In doing so, we could reduce hospitalizations, lung cancers, etc. So in that case, people still wanted to smoke, but they began rationing their cigarettes. So they went from 20 a day to 12 a day. Now you can have some diehards and they got money, they're going to stay right here. But a lot of people are going to have to make some difficult choices and move to this new quantity. Just like we saw here, there's your demand curve. There's a decrease in price. We as consumers, we want more, more, more. They can even lie to us. There's been studies done, and retail studies, where they put products on the shelves side by side that were equal in value and one, they raised the price. They doubled it. If it was 50 cents, they went to $1. But then they put a sign beside it saying that it had been reduced by 50%. Consumers still purchase that product over the other product. They were still paying $1 more than what they should have been paying for the product, but they bought it instead because they perceived it was a great deal. So a lot of times you see all these sales come out. I mean, it's just to get you in there. Sometimes there's some playing with pricing. I know there's a carpet place that's been going out of business in Raleigh for about 40 years. They'll change the name, operate for about 3 years, 4 years. Then they'll have a going out of business sale. They'll close the doors for X number of days to build the hype and say, when we open these doors, there's going to be 50 to 75% markups on everything. But the problem is, most of the people that go shopping for the sale had never looked at the product before the sale. There are companies that are very skilled at liquidating inventory, and it's based on deceiving the consumer, making you believe it was worth more than it actually was. They give you a discount back to regular pricing, and you just eat it up. So there are some weaknesses in the demand, and it's just human weaknesses. That's all it is. It's like the old adage, buyer beware. Like I said, they've been going out of business for a long time. I think that's their actual business model, is to prepare to go bankrupt every 3 years, or say they're going bankrupt every 3 years. So now we're looking at supply curve. This is defined by the business or the producer of the goods. The product they're showing here, they went back to ice cream. And the quantity of ice cream cones, that's your Q. And price of ice cream cones, that's your P. We can see as the price goes down, they're willing to sell less. Price goes down, it's less. Down, it's 2. Down, it's 1. And at 0, they're going to give you 1 ice cream cone, period. They won't do that very long. Just like we saw with the demand curve, they had a schedule of pricing and quantity. It's the same thing here. Now, this is dealing with a single business. Give me a second. I got somebody knocking on the door. Just a second.
Hey, Spencer.
Hello, Cole.
How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
You been vaping?
No,
No.
I'm staying off the vapes.
Good. 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 Hey, so is Mason and your sister? Is it my sister?
I don't have a sister.
Oh, okay.
Cole, shut up.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. There's somebody that was wanting to buy our motor home. So, any questions about the demand curve as we move the supply? It's positively sloped. If you're willing to pay me 50 cents for this pen, I'll probably give you this pen. If you are willing to give me $1,000 for this pen, I'm going to find you a lot of pens. Just like you see in the supply curve, the more you're willing to pay, the more you'll see available in the marketplace. Just like we looked at the market demand, we see the market supply. Here we have two firms, Ben and Jerry. In reality are one, but for the case of this textbook, it's two. Each one of them has different supply curves. Jerry's willing to sell more at the higher prices and less at the lower prices. Ben is the other way around. Just like we did with the demand curve, we just add the supply up, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. to 13, and that creates this market supply. Don't let them trip you up on the test. If they want market demand or market supply and they give you a schedule, just add them up. That's all you have to do. You need to make sure that you're looking at the correct curve. Always have X as your axis and your price is on the Y-axis, the quantity on your X-axis. And what you need to look at is if I increase the price, will quantity go up or down? If you increase the price and the quantity goes up, it is a supply curve. If you increase the price and the quantity goes down, it's a demand curve. You got to remember, one's negative, one's positive. We can see in figure 7 the shifts in the supply curve. They don't tell us what makes it shift, they just tell us it shifts. So just like we saw on the demand curve, decreases to the left, increases to the right. And just like with the demand curve, if there's an increase in demand, the quantity will increase. If there's an increase in supply, the quantity will increase. And it'll be the opposite if it's decreased. So just keep that in mind. Now, if the supply increases, the price will fall. When you're looking at the supply and demand curves. Okay? But if the price was constant, the price is constant. From this point all the way across, we can see if the price is set in the market. This is quantity. There's 3. This is with 1. And this is the quantity with 2. So if the supply curve, if the business is willing to make more product at a lower price, that's an increase in supply. Because we see here that the price didn't change. We see a constant movement from left to right. Here we have the supply curve at the beginning position, and we see it left and right. When we incorporate the demand curve, we will see something completely different happen. So we have a demand curve that falls through here. Here we're going to see quantity go up, and we see price go down. This will be the original equilibrium. And up here, we'll see a quantity fall and price go up. When we're looking at just a single point or single price, we can see exactly what happens to Q. That's all we're looking at is relation to Q. But when we include that demand curve, we'll start seeing the actual equilibrium change, which is a point where quantity supplied is equal to quantity demand. Any questions on that? Okay. If there's just a change in the price of goods, just like we looked at with demand, if there's just a change in the price of goods, that's movement along the supply curve. It's not movement of the supply curve. What they're willing to say is we either willing to give you more or less based on pricing. The input prices, if you, let's say you're producing corn, you're a farmer, and the price of diesel fuel goes up, you're not going to be willing to sell as much corn as you would if the price of diesel was lower. So let's say you produce M&Ms. If the price of sugar goes up, what you need to get back in return is going to increase as well. Normally what you'll see in a situation like that when there's just minor changes is they'll just reduce the number of units in that basket. Technology. We can see the advances in technology. They've been tremendous over the years. We found, even with the corn farm, we found fertilizing systems and GPS and all kinds of things that happen here that have improved the amount of units you can produce and reduce what you're willing to charge for those increased quantities. Expectations. With expectations, just like with the consumer, the business does the same thing. If they expect the price to go up, they're going to reduce the amount that is available today. They're going to hold to sell tomorrow when the price goes up. If they think the price is going to go down, they'll start selling. And they'll start selling immediately so they can take advantage of the current higher price than the expected lower price in the near future. Also, we have to look at the number of sellers as a consumer and as a market for goods. If there's one hot dog stand in Four Oaks, that'll establish a quantity of people who desire the hot dogs. If another, but they can set their price. If there's another hot dog stand built in Four Oaks, there's more quantity now available, more options to the consumer. Therefore, the supply increases, but the prices go down. If another hot dog stand comes in, it's the same thing. It's just a multiplier effect. And it'll go all the way down until the return is zero to the business, at which point they're either going to have to decide to either they do something special with their hot dogs or they start selling something else. Or just get away, liquidate. Okay? Here's the basic supply and demand curve. And they took the supply curve from the ice cream, they took the demand curve from the ice cream. Based on this information, if I were to tell you that the price of milk goes up, you'll see a decrease in the supply of ice cream cones because their cost to produce the goods will go up. You see a decrease in quantity and an increase in the price. If the price of milk goes down significantly, you'll see a shift to the right-hand side. If we're looking at oodles of noodles. Most people consider that an inferior product because under income we have two products, the normal and inferior. With an inferior product, if the price, if the income goes down, you'll consume more of the product. So more oodles and noodles will be sold. If income goes up, you're going to see a decrease in demand for the oodles and noodles, which will also relate as a decrease in price and a decrease in quantity. Businesses need to be aware of all these variables that can affect either the supply or demand on their product. But this is where they sell, it's an equilibrium. It's a moving target. And once they create a supply and demand curve, it's already outdated. But it gives you a general area where everything will be in balance. Quantity supply is equal to quantity demand. Okay? If we look at market forces, if you go back to Adam Smith and Wealth of Nations and discussion about the invisible hand, which is just basic market forces. You can also look at the law of short side domination. And with the law of short side domination, it tells us the first curve intercepted by the price level will dominate. So in that case, we're looking right here. It intercepts this price of 5, intercepts the demand curve before the supply curve. So quantity demand will dominate. The law tells us that it doesn't matter that the companies are willing to produce X number of units at this new price. This will end up being a surplus of goods. And the only way they can break it down is to discount their product. On the other hand, if the price is below equilibrium, the first curve intercepted is now the supply curve. And they tell you that the only thing they'll give you is 4. That's the quantity will be supplied. All these stars that are up here are saying, no thanks. This seller is saying that's their zero profit range. You can operate at zero profit. Now you have others here that their costs are lower and they're willing to sell. But at this point, we transition to businesses that their costs exceed $3 per unit. And because of this, whether it's created by the market or by a legislative act, a regulatory act, we're going to have a shortage of goods. And the invisible hand is going to go down below and try to push that price back to equilibrium. This is the objective right here. Same thing here. We'll have market forces pushing this back down. The invisible hand will be pushing it downward. Now we're going to look at some price control, looking at minimum wage, rent controls, etc. And we'll look at this a little closer. But just realize that the price is above equilibrium. If there's no constraints, the market will force that price back down because people are going to walk away. However, if the price is too low, the businesses are not going to participate. There'll be a shortage of goods and the consumers are going to be willing to pay more for those products. The 3 steps. The first thing you need to do is at a supply or demand curve shift. And all you have to do is ask yourself, is this something that's going to affect the consumer or the business? If it's an increase in the price of Pepsi, you know that's on the supply side. I mean, on the demand side. But there's no movement of the curve. It's just a company increase. But if the price goes up and we're looking at the income of buyers, it's on the demand side. Their income goes up, increase, decrease in income, it goes down. Then you have to decide the curve shifts. And I just said up and down, but what it should be is to the left and to the right, just like we looked at right here. So if I move to the left or to the right, not up and down, it's all based on Q and its response to P, or changes in P. Okay? Then use the supply and demand diagram to see how the shift would change the equilibrium in price and quantity. That's where I would create one of these, just a basic supply and demand curve. Now here's one, law of short side domination. But if you drew just a basic supply and demand curve like this, and you have it with you when you take the test, you can visually just kind of, if you think supply is going up, you notice the supply curve shift, and it's increasing supply, and it moves to the right. You can see that the price will go down and the quantity go up. And you can also remember that if it's a demand curve shift, it's increase in demand curve shifts, both P and Q respond the same way. There's a positive relationship between the movement of demand and P and Q. On the supply side, there's an inverse relationship between P and Q. So if the quantity goes up, the price goes down. If the quantity goes down, the price goes up. If you can grasp that, you will do just fine on the test. They're showing an increase in equilibrium. Now we have movement along the supply curve. This is just movement along the supply curve. Here we see hot weather increase in demand price. So that's the population. They have both the desire and capacity. There'll be an increase in demand for this product. So you'll see price go up and the quantity go down. As winter sets in, not many people are going to be out there running for ice cream. So this will change into the opposite direction. Here we see a supply curve shift. There's an increase in the price of sugar, reduces the supply of ice cream. And they do that because they have to raise the price. Now, if they can't raise the price, they'll just get smaller dippers, where you'll get less units than you did in the past. So instead of getting 10 ounces of ice cream, you get 9 or 8. That will also offset that cost increase because you'll get more units out of a gallon or 5 gallons, whatever it may be. Either way, this shift occurs and it's to the left. If there's an increase in a decrease in the price of sugar, we'll see the supply curve move to the left, to the right, excuse me. Over time, you'll see both shift. You'll see supply shift, demand shift, supply. And what you're looking for is the change. We have ice cream cones. We see a big shift in demand and a small decrease in supply. We go from this equilibrium to a new equilibrium. It's placing one supply and demand curve on top of the other. So this will actually see a reduction in, well, an increase in price and an increase in quantity. There's a demand shift. Here we see a supply shift. The supply, big shift in the supply to the left. There's an increase in demand. So we see the new equilibrium is here, over here. we'll see a decrease in quantity long term and an increase in price long term. Here's that relationship I told you about. There's no change in demand and no change in supply. P and Q are the same. There's no change in demand and increase in supply. P will go up, Q will go down. Decrease in supply, P will go up, Q will go down. So it's saying no change in demand. So there's movement along the demand curve, but no movement of the demand curve. If there's an increase in demand, everything moves together. Now they say ambiguous because, as we'll see in the next chapter, elasticity is also a major issue to deal with. Any questions about supply and demand? Start with this as your base supply and demand curve. Draw one like this. You got a basic equilibrium, base supply. So you have price and quantity defined. And then as you read the question and it says demand's going to move, the supply is going to move, determine what direction, and that'll redefine your price and quantity. Because there'll be a movement of the equilibrium from one point to another. Okay? Any questions? No questions? As I said before, in a meeting I had with the administration,